I do need to start. There we go. Recording is started. So, for today's purposes, funnels are not landing pages. There are a lot of people who have been invited into the marketing space because of the barriers to entry being lowered by the creation of some amazing softwares. Um, and so there are people in the marketing space who don't have the history of the marketing space as a framework for how they think about doing marketing. And the issue, specifically with regard to funnels, is there is a brand name in the marketing space who is quite famous and who shall remain nameless, but whose brand name implies that everyone should click on a funnel. And for people who come into marketing after the existence of that platform, they interpret funnel in the way that that platform functions, which is it shows you a landing page. You take, and this is what a landing page is. It's a page with information that has two, maybe three options. Anyone that lands on the page could leave. We want people to take the action we want. So there's a button on that page to take that specific action we want. And if they do that action, they also move to the next page in the funnel. And then sometimes there's a soft call to action of, if you're not ready to move forward, here's our sign up for our newsletter, kind of additional thing down in the footer. But usually we want them to do one of two things. We either want them to opt out by doing nothing, by leaving the page, or we want them to take the action that we want. And then that series of funnels is what people think of when they say a funnel. Now, that wasn't the case 20 years ago. 20 years ago, when someone said, I have a sales funnel, no one said, what's your series of landing pages? But the term sales funnel predates the internet by a long, long, long ways. What we're going to talk about is the funnel is not the series of pages. The funnel isn't even the software that runs the pages. The other thing that people talk about is make them do what you want them to do. Make them want to keep reading. Keep them reading. You don't control other people. So the funnel doesn't control the other person's behavior. The funnel funnels their behavior. It guides their behavior. It doesn't direct. And I guess depending on the translations, that might be a subtle difference. It guides the decision, but it doesn't it doesn't dictate. There you go. It directs in the softest version of directing. It doesn't direct in the stringent dictating sense. It's not an authoritative controlling their behavior. It's a guiding, coaching, advising their behavior. We're also going to talk about how just because you have their contact information, they've technically opted into your environment. They've joined into your environment. You're in proximity with each other. You're in the same community. Doesn't necessarily mean that they've given you permission to get into their personal space. And then we're going to talk about cold outreach is a funnel. And that's the point I'm trying to make with the theme here is the funnel isn't the series of pages. The funnel is the customer journey. If your funnel is a cold outreach, if your marketing strategy is a cold outreach strategy, that doesn't mean you don't have a sales funnel. It just means you're engaging with the person and giving them the opportunity to follow along on the journey that you're taking them on, as opposed to giving a website and asking them to come and join you on the journey and follow you're bringing the journey to them as opposed to waiting for their journey to come to you. And then we're going to talk about why I spend so much time talking about the 9-point marketing plan as a framework for strategically thinking about small business marketing. I'm going to describe how the funnel, even if it is a series of landing pages, or even if it is a series of emails, or if it's a series of social media posts, how that funnel construct fits within the framework of the marketing strategy articulated as an endpoint marketing plan. Okay. The point is, funnels today in marketing are one of the most misunderstood concepts. And literally 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. It was very clear 20 years ago what a marketing funnel consisted of. And what that's led to is a situation where people think that the problem with the funnel is the copy or the creatives on the page, when really the most likely problem is a conceptual strategic problem that's being reflected downstream in poor conversions based on an upstream failure to do strategic analysis and decision making in the first place. So I'm not going to talk about page design. I'm not going to talk about copywriting. I'm not going to do a software build through of showing you the features of how to build a landing page. The conversation today is about how to come alongside someone as they are on their life journey to guide them through making a purchasing journey, a purchasing decision. So the funnel is not the page. The page, the series of pages, might in fact be the deliverable. If your offer is a funnel builder, the page and the automations that run and the forms that are on the page and the automations that run that are triggered by the form fill may in fact be your deliverable. And there's nothing wrong with that being your offer. But the sales funnel is the series of experiences. So I heard let me do the I'll come to the analogy here in just a minute. The page is a static thing. It's an artifact. It exists in time and space. The life experience of the customer is a vague whisper. The song "Life is a Dream." The person's journey is the person's journey, and it's chaos and it's disorganized. And we as the marketer want this to be this very nice linear sales funnel, but every step of that sales funnel is actually an interruption of that person's life. That person is doing whatever their life is doing, and we're touching them at various points along that journey. To us, it's a structured series of actions that lead to a sales close, either yes or no buy decision, but to us, it's linear. Touch point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and a purchase. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a no. 1, 2, 3, and a purchase. That's what we see. The customer is on this other journey. There's all these other chaotic things that are happening in their life. So the funnel exists whether you build the pages or not. And I'm going to tie it back. So the AIDA is the model that I typically. There's another model, and the 5 levels of awareness. Unaware. I'm going to get them wrong. Unaware, problem aware, solution aware, your solution aware. I'm missing one. But there's 5 levels of awareness where the person doesn't even know they have a problem. They're aware of the problem, but they don't know if there's any solutions. They're aware that you are a solution provider, but aren't sure that you're the one to provide service. And then the 5th level down. And again, I'm doing this off the top of my head, and not remembering what all 5 of them are. I usually use the AIDA model, but the 2 models have the same effect. AIDA is attention, interest, decision, action. You have to get their attention, and that's the problem unaware, problem aware, solution unaware, solution specific solution aware, attention, interest. You have to give them time to examine the situation. Depending on their personality type, they need more or less time. They need more or less levels of detail in the time to give them an opportunity to make a decision. And then and only then do they finally take action. So on the screen, I don't have a funnel, shaped funnel, because it's deliberate. People are gathering information wherever they're gathering information and however they're gathering information. And eventually they're reaching a decision that solves their problem. And it may not be your solution, but if their problem is resolved, that's a good outcome. That's a net good in the world. If they're stuck in the world of indecision, that's a net negative in the world. So the AIDA model was originally articulated in 1910. Here we are, we're already in the second quarter of the 21st century, fully 115 years after the AIDA model. And the AIDA model was developed long before the internet existed. So it has nothing to do with the internet. So a sales funnel might look like you're a sales rep for building materials, and you get on the road and you go visit hardware stores and describe why your building material is the building material that they should stock. Fencing or flooring or roofing or nails or whatever it is that you sell. And you have to go back and visit that same store 3, 4, 5, 6 times before they decide, you know what, we've been stocking this other product, but we're going to put a test sample of your product on the shelf and we'll see what happens. That's a sales funnel. For the hardware customer buyer, the sales funnel is, I know I need hardware. There's a collection of hardware at the hardware store. I'm going to go see what options they have for this particular kind of material. I was having a conversation on Facebook here about a month, maybe 2 months ago already. And the question was, does every business need a funnel? And my argument is the argument that I'm making today. My argument is every business has a funnel. Most of the people that were commenting on that thread were saying either absolutely you must have a landing page, or they were saying no, you don't need a landing page. And I'm saying actually yes, you do have a funnel whether you have a landing page or not. And I had this guy say, well, my local donut shop, my local pastry shop doesn't have a funnel because there's always a line of people at the door. They're getting plenty of business by word of mouth and by repeat customers. They don't need a landing page. They don't need a sales funnel. And I would counter argue that the door to the building is the sales funnel. The queue of people outside the door waiting to get in is the sales funnel. Someone walks by and they see that line and they see the sign at the top of the building that says we sell pastries, and they see this line of people, they say those must be some pretty good pastries, and they get in the line, they opt in to the experience, and they go to the back of the line and they say, hey, why are you in line to go into this pastry shop? These are the best donuts in the city. There you go. That's the sales funnel. All the way up to the point they walk through the door, they probably can opt back out. Once they actually go through the door in their sales funnel, they've probably made the decision they are going to buy. The question is, what are they going to buy? Now they're at the counter and they still have to make a refinement decision. That sales funnel had nothing to do with the internet. Also, I said the sales funnel in our software world, sales funnel is the series of landing pages It's the forms that are on the landing pages and the automation that happens when the form gets filled out. But here's the reality. Automation doesn't create clarity. If chaos and confusion exists, AI and automation will amplify that confusion. The point of this slide is on one side of the slide over there is all this noise. And the amazing thing about the technology that we have in this the second half of the 21st century is even small brands can make a big noise. The problem is if you have a chaotic message, you're unclear about your audience and your message. What you're going to do is use those tools to make a lot of noise, saying the wrong thing in the wrong place to the wrong audience. On the other hand, if you're on the other side of the chart and you have clarity, the tools allow you to speak to a specific audience with a specific message at a specific time and place where they're ready to hear the message. Yes, HighLevel has a funnel builder's tool. That doesn't mean funnels start in the HighLevel funnel builder. Yes, those funnel pages have forms. That doesn't mean you start on the form page. In planning, in sequencing, in strategy, this is what we're teaching here in GHL Business Launch. Get clarity first. Slow down, stop the build, decide what you're building and why. Then, following Mike Paceto's snapshot documentation framework, scope the project. Once you know what you're trying to do and the scope of the project, then start building. Because now instead of building and tearing it down and building and tearing it down, you'll know when you're thanks Interpret. You'll know when you're where you're supposed to be because the you'll have met the scope of the project, and the scope of the project is defined by the strategy that you're trying to implement. Clarity in the message is a thinking decision, not a configuration step or a build step in the software, in the platform. Audience and message before the automation. Funnels will reveal gaps in your thinking. They won't fix gaps in your thinking. We still have emotion on the other side, on this side of the equation. What we have over there is chaos induced by confusion. And the emotions are mixed in, and you've got someone on an emotional roller coaster that isn't helping them. In the other side of the equation, you're communicating with emotion, but it's with a particular message to a particular audience, and the automation and the technology and the AI amplifies the message, amplifies the emotion. Excess emotion, random versus focused and deliberate. The buyer is on their life journey. We don't control their journey. They're on whatever their journey is. We aren't moving people to where we want them to be. If we are being ethical, we are not forcing an outcome. We are guiding an outcome. We're giving people opportunities to make the decision that is going to improve their life. Interesting. My AI made a double-headed dog. That is funny. All right. We look at our funnel as as a system that accomplishes our objective. But your buyers aren't in your system. Your buyers are living their life, whatever that life happens to be. And if you're presenting them an opportunity and they drop off, if they opt out, that's not a failure of your funnel. That is them making the right decision for them to move somewhere else. Maybe in the end they decide not to solve that problem, or they decide to use a different vendor, or they decide to solve the problem, but in a different way than you would ever have imagined that the problem could be solved. Monitoring when those opt-outs happen isn't a failure of the funnel. I describe it this way. The funnel should be leaky. The funnel should have deliberate opportunities for people who are never going to buy to not buy. I was in somebody's sales funnel. Somebody cuts on my website, starts chatting with my chatbot, says, "Hey, I want to set an appointment with you." And I could tell from the dialogue going back and forth, and I interrupted my AI a couple times so that I could have a human interaction with this person, trying to understand what they wanted to get out of the meeting. And I could tell that their sole objective was to sell to me. And usually if I have an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody and there's a potential that not that they would buy from me, but that we could possibly develop a mutually respectful and positively reinforcing industry, not a partnership because we're not exchange, but industry reciprocity and collaboration, not in a financial sense, but in a mutually edifying way. I'll often take those calls, even though I know it's not going to turn into money for either them or for me. In this case, I could tell that this person's entire interest was in selling his service to me. And I tried 2 or 3 times to say, "Hey, let's not have this appointment." He says, "Oh, you just got to get on the call with him." He missed the information that I was giving him. So sure enough, the day of the appointment comes, and when we get on the call, it's not just him. Turns out he's an appointment setter, and his principal was on the call too. And his principal was getting ready to launch into his pitch. And I said, "Okay, we did 30, 40 seconds, a minute and a half each for the three of us to do pleasantries and greetings." And then I said, "Before you start, are you here to have a conversation with me, or are you here to pitch me your services?" That call lasted less than 5 minutes, including all the pleasantries, because as soon as the principal realized that I wanted to have a conversation with him instead of being pitched to by him, it wasn't useful, valid use of his time. I could have saved him even the 5 minutes if his appointment setter had have listened to the information I was giving him. That principal would have never had to been on the call in the first place. So the funnel doesn't make people do things. The point is, the funnel gives people a place, a structure to rest in comfortably, safely, while they are making the decision. If your funnel is anxiety inducing and loaded with emotion and false FOMO, false fear of missing out, and false expectation, exaggerated expectation creation, and And artificial scarcity, that's not a safe place for the buyer. Yes, you will get some sales. And if your objective is to not have to deal with the 60 or 70% in the middle who are slow decision makers, if you just want to get the quick low-hanging fruit, maybe that's the right answer. Maybe making your funnel so aggressive that only the fast decision makers opt in because that's the kind of person you want to work with. Okay, that's a choice. You make your funnel that way on purpose. You deliberately design it to push 80% of people out because you only want the top 20% of decision makers. But that's not going to feel like a safe place for most people who are um, on the DISC, people who are supportive in I forget what C what I interactive, the I and S people in the world, which are the majority of people, not D's and C's. Um, if your funnel is pushy, 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 false scarcity, you will not create a safe place where those I and S personality types can rest in the decision. You will push them out. You will push them out early. And that's a choice. And then I would counter argue that that's why my funnels exist the way my funnels exist. They exist for people to rest, ruminate, think, progress carefully, deliberately to an objective. But your funnel doesn't have to. Your funnel just needs to consider the fact that you can't control even the D-type personalities. Or for those of us who are C's, you can't push enough information to us to force us to make a decision. You can give us enough information that we can choose to make a decision, but we will calculate our decision because we're calculators. Up to now, we've been talking about how funnels are misunderstood because they're looked at by the marketer as a tool for manipulation instead of as a framework for guiding a decision. Next, we're going to talk about what is for me the most concerning part of today's presentation. Um, but I want to caveat by saying I don't think most marketers who are doing the thing that is negative on this next slide are doing so maliciously or intentionally or manipulatively. Most marketers are reasonably well-intentioned people who have a valid solution to a particular problem, and they're just trying to give people an opportunity to buy it. The problem comes when they're so aggressive in how they push that solution that they fail to respect the other person, the buyer's life experience. This is what it looks like. Just because you're in the same space doesn't mean that person trusts you. Just because you have their information, email, social media account, even a phone number, doesn't mean they trust you enough to buy your product. They're probably still judging you. This is actually the really hard, nuanced part of a sales funnel strategy is guessing where in this journey this person is from I don't know you to I know you to I like you to I trust you. You don't get to dictate to someone their level of trust of you. To you, you want momentum. You want a decision. But just because the person sees you doesn't mean they trust you. Just because they're following your content and they're learning from you doesn't mean they're inviting you to pitch them yet. Just because they've opted in for your lead magnet doesn't mean they're ready to move to your flagship product yet. Someone's given you their contact information, or they're actively present on social media and therefore they're accessible to you, doesn't mean that you're welcome to steal their attention. So this other debate I'm having, this other discussion I'm having with people in the marketing space is all the people doing outbound marketing are sending me a script or sending you a script, sending someone a script saying, here's my thing, here's who I am, here's the problem I solve. Do you want my solution? And what that message to the receiver says is I have to stop whatever I was doing for however long it takes to evaluate that message and decide to accept the message and continue thinking about it, or to reject the message. That amount of time, and maybe it's 30 seconds, cannot come back. Maybe it's only 30 seconds, but it's gone. Sometimes, going back to an earlier talking point, sometimes your message, not giving them the option to delay the decision, is forcing someone to just say no because they don't have time to think about whether they might want to say maybe. If you give them a binary choice, yes or no, and they don't have time to evaluate whether yes is a good decision, they have to choose no. If you give them the safe place to say, I don't know yet, and that's a limitation of the English language, no and no are so close together when spoken. If you give them the option, instead of saying no, say not yet, I have to rest here, that safe space buys time to go to transition from like to trust. Seth Godin talks about permission marketing. Proximity gives you access. Being in the same Facebook groups, being in the same LinkedIn groups, being in the same professional circles gives you access. Permission gives you influence. And I'm not going to go into my authority in that person's life story because I've covered it a couple times since like November. So if you want a link to my brother's lacking authority, have advice, cannot give it because I don't have authority, ask me for it and I'll give you a link to one of those videos where I talk about that. A funnel doesn't need a landing page. A funnel can be email or DM, cold email, cold DM, traditional cold calling, literally on the phone, or by in person, walking up and knocking on the door, walking into a business. When the business is on Main Street and has an unlocked door during business hours, you have access to that business. You probably have access to the manager or the owner by walking in and saying, can I talk to the owner? But that doesn't give you influence with that owner. Walking in that way and asking for that amount of their time that is as a distraction from whatever they were working on their agenda already puts them on the defensive. You're in a trust deficit with this person before you even start the conversation. Being near someone physically or in cyberspace doesn't mean you're invited to invade their personal space. Being near and assuming that gives you authority to start pitching will feel like pressure. If you don't put pressure, if you take your proximity to build relationship without pressure, that provides a safe place where the person can now listen to you without defensiveness. In person, this happens all the time in in-person networking. In in-person networking, it's, and it happens all the time in social media. It's just harder to see because you can't read the facial expression. But in in-person networking, you can see it on the person's face. You can sit there in the corner of the room and watch the room, and you can watch the guy who's constantly pitching, and he'll say, "Hi, good to see you. Here's my thing." And it's the exact same pitch he gave last week or the week before. And you can watch the person that he's talking to be defensive. They they back up, their face gets either neutral or concerned, and they're polite and they nod and they shake his hand, but he doesn't have permission to give them to influence their decisions. And so he's burning that bridge in front of you. You're watching it happen between these two people, or maybe it's happening to you. The same thing happens on social media, except often, unless they type the words angrily, you can't read the defensiveness. But if you're pushing if you're pushing cold DM strategy and you're not getting the results you're expecting, it could be because you're trying to reach beyond the level of trust that you currently have with this person. Here's a key decision, this distinction. The exact same mission, the exact same message can feel like spam in one moment and like a lifeline in another. Literally the exact same message to the exact same person when they weren't ready for it versus when they were ready, when they weren't ready for it versus when they were ready for it, can feel like spam or it can feel like a lifeline. It's not that a spammy message is a spammy message is a spammy message. It's that the timing or the audience were off. The content of the message was probably fine. It maybe was ambiguous or a poor fit. It wasn't great. So on the spectrum above here, it's unlikely that a message, the body that is generic, that falls in the category of poor fit, could be a good fit or great. But that generic poor fit message might be spam in one situation and ambiguous or even a good fit relevant in another situation. And not all messages have to be a great personalized relational fit. Relevant, informative, and respectful will go a long, long ways. Generic and promotional, actually the poor fit, as long as it's respectful, will probably work a lot of times. The thing that makes poor fit and spam dis poor and spam, what puts a message in that bucket for the receiver is the fact that it's assuming that the receiver cares. It assumes that the receiver should it assumes the receiver should trust the sender. The receiver doesn't even know the sender yet, and yet the message is assuming that the receiver should be ready to purchase, should have a level of trust that would result in a purchase. That's the assumption that makes a good message and a poor fit. We do teach that in GHL Business Launch, we teach that cold outreach is absolutely a valid marketing strategy. We teach the Alex Hormozy Core 4, one-to-one cold, one-to-one warm, one to many cold, one to many warm. Cold is one of the categories. on that matrix. Cold messages isn't the problem. It's cold messages that are irrelevant and disrespectful, or based on an assumption about the receiver that put them out of the category of good cold outreach and in the category of poor cold outreach. Not bad, just poor. And again, it's not because the person who's sending the message is an evil or manipulative person. It's because the person who's sending the message isn't putting themselves in the other person's shoes and listening to their own message from a position of, if this was the first time I heard from this person, what would I expect to hear from? What would I expect? What would I be willing to listen to? Not what I would want them to listen to, what would I listen to? The way that you create a cold outreach marketing strategy that fits in the good to great fit categories, they're drawn as buckets with distinct boundary lines. They're absolutely not distinct. They're gray area bounds between each of these categories. Again, what could be a great outreach in one moment could be equally a disruption in another. And as the sender, you have no idea, no way to know at the moment that this message arrives how it's going to land. The reason we spend so much time talking about steps 1, 2, 3 of the 9-point marketing plan is, who is the audience? What is the message? What channels is that audience listening? If you know what problem you're solving, how you're communicating that problem, and who you're solving it for, it's much easier to slide from ambiguous to good in this framework. Then what we build on a landing page or what we write in an email sequence starts making sense, because that steps 1, 2, 3 is the planning stage, the before stage of the marketing strategy. 4, 5, and 6, lead capture, lead nurture, lead close, are the execution. That's after I've crafted the message that exists on that landing page, that exists in that ad, that exists in the cold email or the cold DM. If I know who I'm talking to, I can provide it to that audience in a channel that is relevant, informative, and respectful, and give them the safe place to make their own decision. Cold outreach is not bad. Skipping steps in the planning the strategy is a choice that results in unclear messaging, which ends up having bad outcomes, often by very well-intentioned people. Because warm nurture doesn't start warm, it becomes warm. Somewhere between the channel and lead capture, the conversation goes from I don't even know you to I know you, and if you're done well, it slides to I like you, let's have a conversation to decide whether I trust you. Cold outreach will make poor decisions upstream in the strategy development cycle visible, because it removes the illusion that the message that you are transmitting is relevant to the audience. Because in your strategy, you are going to believe every time that your message is the right message for that audience. And if it is, good. But if it's not, if there's a poor audience to message fit, there's a poor market fit for the product, or at least the way the product is being marketed, then that will be revealed when lead capture or the sales process, the lead close, doesn't turn into conversions. And it's much more expensive to fix then. Like the story I told a little bit ago, where I'm on the video call with this principal from the service provider company. That was expensive to him. And it was expensive to me too. But he could have saved himself all of that time if he had directed his appointment setter to be respectful of my time. And I actually, so here's it was spendy time for me, but it was a talking point for now, an illustration for now. So I got something out of it. Meanwhile, he's gone, I just wasted 15 minutes of my life. When there's no prior relationship, the structure of the funnel matters more than the message. Because the exact same message presented one way will be jarring and disruptive and destroy trust before trust even exists, or presented another way respectfully and relationally will buy time for the know, like, and trust to grow. And I'm deliberately going over time because I started late and I'm going to finish my talk instead of training to time. Funnels don't exist as pages or tools. The funnel is part of this larger marketing system, marketing strategy, marketing plan that have particular artifacts that show up in, especially steps 4, 5, and 6, and also in 7, 9, and a little bit of 8. So what I'm trying to encourage is think about the strategy you're employing, scope the project that you're about to engage in before you click on the menu item in your HighLevel account that is sites, funnels, page builder. The page is a tactic. The content on the page is a reflection of the strategy, a reflection of the decisions, a reflection of the message. If you have funnels either that you are producing or managing that feel fragile, that it seems like they don't quite do exactly what you expect them to do, or they, I don't want to describe fragile. They have a tendency to produce intermittent results. It's often not because the funnel itself is broken. It's not a matter of changing the color by 2 or 3 shades this way or that way, changing the happies to glads and the font from Times New Roman to Arial, making stuff up. Helvetica. Often the issue is a reflection of the fact that thinking about the objectives of this funnel never happened in the first place. Because what's really easy now that wasn't easy 25 years ago is I can take a template of someone else's funnel, and we have a term for it. It's called funnel hacking. I can take someone else's template. I can change the product name and the city name, and I can believe that I have a funnel that will convert. But I haven't actually done a strategic analysis on my product, my market segment, my product fit. I hacked someone else's funnel for their product in their market, and I dump it into my market with my product, that's a fragile funnel. Maybe it'll work, but do you have any analysis to tell you that it will? Most funnel failures don't come from problems that are visible on the landing page. They don't come from problems that are revealed in the copy that's in the email. The funnel failures come from skipping audience clarity in steps 1, 2, and to a degree 3, or a mismatched product market fit. And we're going to talk about that next week, about the business models that you might follow. And so if you're offering the right audience the wrong product, you're not going to close that sale. If you're offering the right product to the wrong audience, right audience, wrong product, you get my point, right? So everything that we work on in this training program, GHL Business Launch, is about protecting your upstream thinking so that implementation doesn't feel like constant work, doesn't feel like you're constantly adapting or repairing the details on the landing page, or can I just find the right DM script? Well, if you're in a relational conversation with somebody, what words you write in the direct message are a lot less important than the fact that you wrote a message in the direct message. If you're spamming somebody, the only way you get any closes is if you get the exact right script. So instead of spamming, enter a relationship, have a conversation, and don't worry about the exact right script. Just have a conversation and see where it goes. What we're going to do, we're now at the end of the first month of the quarter. We talked about like where we're going with GHL Business Launch, and then last week I leveled up to just talking about leadership, especially when you're not in a leadership position, how you demonstrate leadership. Aaron Oliver is going to talk to us about the systems that we use to do cold outreach. He's probably going to talk about some of the mechanics of actually getting on the landing page, I said, do the thinking before. He's going to show you, once you've done the thinking, here's how you implement it. There was a question in the Facebook group here in the last 7 days, 3 or 4 days ago, which was, hey, can you tell me about the stores? Can you tell me about e-commerce in HighLevel? Well, Aaron literally did a demonstration of starting the setup of a e-commerce store in HighLevel as one of our recent live trainings inside the private program. We don't do those trainings publicly on Facebook. We do those trainings in the closed group on Kollab. So he'll dig deeper for those of you who want to dig deeper. That's where you do that in the Kollab group. We're also going to have Carrie Sassone talk to us about, if you are doing cold outreach, what does the content of that marketing message read like? She frames it in terms of email marketing. And she talks a lot about database reactivation. In other words, email marketing to people who are already opted in, people who are already in our database for one reason or another, and segmenting that audience in ways that allow us to message one part of the audience more aggressively because they're deeper into our funnel, they've rested in a safe space longer, versus the ones that are just aware of us, you message them differently. So next week on February 2nd, we will walk through the 9 business model framework um, that is specifically focused to if you are a business using HighLevel. What business model do you use to turn that tool that is the foundation that your business is built on, or is it one of the tools that you use to offer services? How do you use it to serve your customer? Um, it will apply also to people who have another kind of business who are just using HighLevel as their automation platform. It'll apply also, but particularly it talks to people who either have a high-level agency or do high-level services, and maybe don't actually have a high-level subscription. We'll talk to the implications there as well. But but the point is to address the strategic issue of if you have a mismatch between who you're talking to, what you're talking to them about, and what business your actual business model using HighLevel is going to be, then you create this friction in the sales funnel that shows up downstream. It shows up in step 6 or step 8, because you're capturing and nurturing the wrong audience for the service you're actually trying to provide. And those are really expensive problems to fix because you haven't done the thinking in the first place about what business, what product, what service you're actually providing, who that's for, what problem that solves for them, how and where they're listening. Steps 1, 2, 3. Facebook, our Facebook GHL Business Launch Group is where we do this kind of public training and interaction and build our relationships, have these about conversations about what each of us is trying to do with our respective businesses. If you want to slow down and do some self-reflective analysis on how to apply these concepts to your specific situation, we do that in the private collab group, also called GHL Business Launch. So that's why we have 2 different frameworks, 2 different settings, because here we have this general conversation that's happening in public. There, yes, it's still a open group, but it's a smaller open group. You can see the names of all the people that are in that group. Decide whether you want to reveal that information, if you want to have or if you want to have a one-to-one conversation with me. But the point is, systems come after our positioning ourselves as leaders, not before. Once we understand that proximity doesn't equal permission, the question of a funnel becomes much more practical. Because what does a funnel look like when permission hasn't been earned yet? I would argue that it looks like pressure. It looks like manipulation. When permission exists, when relationship exists, the funnel looks like guidance and a lifeline. A funnel is not something that you build once and forget. It is something that you respect every time you have a conversation with someone in your target market. I'm Keith Bashirs. I'm the bald guy. And in GHL Business Launch, we help people think about who their target audience is, how they're going to communicate with that target audience, and how they build a profitable, sustainable business serving that target audience.